All right, the live stream is started. You can begin the round. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, seeing as we've received a message to get started, let's call the case of the Estates of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Austin Worrell. Scoring judge, please look to the two buttons in the lower left of your screen. Remember to keep your audio and video off. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means only the people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. Can the attorneys please make appearances for the record?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Abigail Franke, and along with my co-counsel, Mr. Haza Kazan.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Ms. Tatum Pike.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We will be representing the plaintiff in today's case, the estate of Genesis Petrillo. Also at this time, Your Honor should have received a packet containing relevant Midlands case law, the Midlands rules of evidence, stipulations, and special instructions. Can I confirm that you have received that?
I do have it. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now we would ask to tender these documents officially to the bench.
Consider them so tendered.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next, we would like to invoke Rule 603, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
Consider all witnesses constructively sworn.
And next, we would like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses.
And consider all witnesses constructively sequestered. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lastly, we would like to point your attention to Stipulation 3, which declares that Exhibits 1 through 10 have been pre-admitted for today's proceeding.
The court will note that Exhibits 1 through 10 are admitted into evidence, and we will not deal with any issues of admission when they come up throughout the course of the trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Defense?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Lauren Sager, and I, along with my co-counsels, Aaron Cooper.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Julia Robertson.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Represent the defendant in today's case, Harper Martini and Peony Estates. The defense has no pretrial motions at this time and is ready to proceed.
All right. Anything further from either side?
No, Your Honor.
Then let's go ahead and proceed to opening statements.
May it please the court. Your Honor, closing counsel, members of the jury, it was an accident waiting to happen. On the morning of June 8th, 2019, Genesis Petrillo was declared dead in the emergency room from pesticide poisoning. In the days leading up to this tragedy, Genesis was in the final stages of marrying the love of his life, Casey Soto. And on the morning of their wedding, right before that moment of happiness, Genesis died. Not through any fault of his own, but as we'll show you, because of the deliberate carelessness of Peony Estates. Carelessness when it came to handling and storing pesticides within the winery. Carelessness, which they had been warned about multiple times. Carelessness, which, as the employees of Peony Estates themselves will tell you, they knew could cost a life. And it did. Members of the jury, due to the carelessness of Peony Estates, this was an accident waiting to happen. And Genesis Petrillo was that accident. But why is this sad tale deserve to be put in court today? Because it is evident that in this case, Peony Estates failed to exercise reasonable care in their actions. They failed to take into account the potential harm that they may cause towards those they had a responsibility to, harm that was inflicted upon the person of Genesis Petrillo when their employees, due to their own irresponsibility and recklessness, let pesticides slip into a Peony Estates 2019 bottle of Cara wine. And subsequently, after drinking that bottle, hours later, Genesis Petrillo will be declared dead from pesticide poisoning. And that is why we, the plaintiff, have filed a claim for negligence against Peony Estates. And we must prove this to you through a preponderance of evidence. By this, we simply mean that we must show to you that it is more likely than not that Peony Estates is in fact negligent in this scenario. Now, to actually show that Peony Estates is liable, we must demonstrate two things to you today. One, that Peony Estates failed in their duty to exercise reasonable care towards those they had a responsibility to, and hence violated the health code statutes of the state of Midlands. And two, that by doing so, they actively harmed the plaintiff, Genesis Petrillo. And we will prove this to you throughout today's session when we call 3 witnesses to the stand. We'll prove this to you when we call Health Inspector Adkins O'Keefe to testify on the multiple and repeated health code violations that Peony Estates committed for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. The health inspector will tell you how he warned them of the dangers of mishandling pesticides within the winery and within the bottling area of the winery itself. And he'll also tell you how throughout nearly every single inspection, they failed to rectify the conditions that created an accident waiting to happen. We'll prove this to you when we call Danny Francasio to the stand. We'll reveal to you how Harper Martini, the owner of Peony Estates, disclosed the fact that they were facing a massive pest infestation, and that in truth, due to their desperate efforts in their attempt to contain this infestation, they were blatantly disregarding the law on how to safely use pesticides without harming their patrons, without creating an environment which was an accident waiting to happen. And we'll prove this to you when we call Dr. Jameen Kwan to give his expert opinion on the fact that Genesis Petrillo, upon being the only one to drink from the only bottle of 2019 Peony Estates Cara wine, died from pesticide poisoning. Pesticide poisoning that was caused by the negligence of Peony Estates. Members of the jury, I, along with my co-counsels, will prove to you that why you have to conclude that due to the irresponsibility and recklessness of the employees of Peony Estates, that they created an environment which was an accident waiting to happen, and that the only just verdict you can reach is to hold Peony Estates liable.
Thank you, counsel. Defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, the jury. Today is a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that phrase hits right to this case, because this case is about how 2 people with the same enemy came together to take down Peony Estates. First, there was Danny Francasio, a witness that the prosecution will call. And they had been hurt by Harper, and then they had met Genesis. Genesis was the son-in-law, the future son-in-law to Mr. Harper Martini. And together they were planning to work together to take down Peony Estates. And it is because they could not be, and it is because Peony Estates could not be expected to, the prosecution had said that this was an accident waiting to happen. Well, actually, this was like an accident expected to happen. The accident just happened to happen to the wrong person, to the late Genesis Petrillo. And in today's case, we will demonstrate how Danny and Genesis had worked together to make this happen, and that it was not the negligence of Peony Estates, but rather the conspiracy between Danny and Genesis. We will call 3 witnesses today. First, we will call Austin Lewis. And Austin Lewis will show how diligent Peony Estates were in dealing with their pesticides. And he will also testify to the cruel nature of Danny Francasio and how he would do anything it takes to take down the opposing business. Secondly, we will call Dr. Cannon, who will demonstrate how regarding to the expert witness of what Dr. Kwan, the prosecution's witness, will say. And thirdly, we will call Blair Osborne, who will testify to the love Harper had for her business and the due diligence that she witnessed while working with the estate. And at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel Julia Robertson will come before you and ask you to rule in favor of the defendant. And I ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the plaintiff like to proceed with their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to call our first witness. And at this time, we call Riley Adkins O'Keefe to the stand.
You may
proceed.
proceed.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Riley Adkins O'Keefe.
And what do you do for a living, Mrs. O'Keefe?
I'm a health and safety inspector at the Rapid River County Department of Health and Environmental Services, or DHES for short.
What do you do as a health and safety inspector?
It's my job to make sure that establishments are up to code on a variety of standards, such as disease control, cleanliness, sanitary operations, and the works.
Why are these rules and standards so important?
Well, if they aren't followed, then that could lead to serious consequences, such as injuries, chronic or acute illnesses, and in worst case, possibly even death.
Now, what kind of inspections do you do in your line of work?
All kinds, really. But I primarily focus on wineries.
How much experience would you say you have inspecting wineries?
I have done over 170 FDA level winery inspections. I've been doing them since the very beginning, ever since DHES was regulated to do so by the FDA.
Now, Ms. O'Keefe, why are you here today?
I'm here to testify on my findings at Peony Estates in 2015, 2018, and 2019.
How long have you been an inspector at Peony Estates?
Since 2015.
And what was your first impression of Peony Estates?
Good. They maintained a well-organized and clean facility with the exception of a pesticide storage issue.
What was this pesticide storage issue?
Pesticides were being stored too close to the kitchen and bottling area of the facility.
Why is it important to keep up pesticide standard?
Well, this put the bottling and kitchen area of the estate at a risk for contamination.
Did you tell anyone about this finding?
Yes, I informed the owner, Harper Martini, and made sure that he moved the pesticide to a more compliant location, so 50 feet away at least from the facility.
Was this the last time you worked with Peony Estates?
No. In 2018, I received an anonymous tip that Peony Estates was not following standard procedure.
What standard procedure were they not following?
There were bugs in the cellar.
Now, what happened when you arrived for your inspection for this?
I first met with Harper Martini, and as he was taking me to the cellar, I observed that he was nervous, fidgeting, and rarely making eye contact.
Now, what did you observe in the cellar during your inspection?
I noted the presence of bugs, including beetles and mites.
Okay, why are bugs a health issue?
If bugs get into the wine or just from going around in the equipment, then they pose serious issues for cross-contamination or just general unhygienic properties.
Of course. How do you get rid of bugs if they've already infested or if they're already present?
Well, if they're already in the establishment, as was the case in Peony Estates, then the best thing to do is spray some pesticides.
How do you make sure that the wine or any of the equipment isn't contaminated while using pesticides?
Well, the procedure for this is you need to first seal up the wine containers, remove them, remove any equipment you have from the area, then spray your pesticides and wait 48 hours, and that's key, 48 hours before moving anything back into the room.
What should you do if some wine has been contaminated? Or
Throw it
you
out.
suspect it?
You just can't take chances with something like that. So best thing to do is just dispose of it.
Now, what did you do after making all these observations in your inspection?
Well, based off of those observations, I decided to have a follow-up sometime in the next year.
When did you have this follow-up inspection?
On May 8th of 2019.
And what were the results of that inspection?
Well, I found not one, not two, but 4 major health code violations.
Now,
three of those health violations were in the bottling area or related to pesticide use.
thank you. Where were these health code violations?
Again, they were in the bottling area of the facility.
Of course. What was the first issue related to pesticides?
Well, first, there were containers of pesticides just lying out in the open.
Why is this an issue?
This poses a great risk for contamination, and if the pesticide got into the wine or onto the equipment, then that could cause serious consequences down the line.
Now, what was the second problem with pesticides?
Second, the employees could not tell me proper pesticide procedure, and the bottling employees in particular couldn't tell me why it was important to keep pesticides out of the wine.
Why is it important that employees know these standards and procedures?
This is huge. Toxic chemicals just should not be mixed with beverages in general.
What was the final or the third issue related to pesticides?
The last issue was that there was a bottle of wine labeled Cara sitting right next to a bottle of pesticide.
Why is that a problem?
This put that particular bottle at a huge risk for contamination. And again, if pesticide did get into that wine and someone drank it, it would have serious health effects.
Did you tell anyone about that bottle of wine?
Yes, I told one of the employees, I believe Kirby Doolittle was their name, and asked him to dispose of it.
Now, what conclusion did you come to after making this inspection?
Based off of the major violations I found, I decided to put Peony Estates on probation.
What does probation mean for a winery?
Probation means that I would visit unexpectedly sometime in the next 45 days just to make sure that they fixed all of their major violations.
What would happen if they didn't fix all of these health code violations?
If not fixed, then Peony Estates would have to suspend their operations.
When did you make this follow-up inspection?
I did that on May 30th.
And what were the results of that inspection?
They appeared to have fixed all of their issues.
Did you see anything concerning during your visit?
Yes, I noticed that there was a bottle of Cara wine in the same location on the same shelf in the bottling area of the facility.
Why did this look concerning?
You know, it appeared to be the very same bottle of wine that I told Doolittle to dispose of earlier.
Thank you, and no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Permission to proceed?
You may proceed.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, Ms. Atkins O'Keefe. I have a few questions for you, okay?
Okay.
During your examination of Peony Estates, you noted that there was an average amount of pesticides used in your initial inspection, correct?
In my initial inspection, yes. Yes, that's correct.
And you noted that there was a minor storage problem with the pesticides when you visited. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Harper Martini corrected that problem immediately, correct?
Yes, I personally watched her to ensure that she moved the pesticides to a location 50 feet away.
And you didn't find any other safety concerns in that particular investigation, correct?
Not in 2015, no.
And you found that the cleaning of the facilities was well organized and adequate, correct?
Yes, I did.
When you went back for a second investigation, it was because of an anonymous tip, correct?
Yes, it was from a letter I received from the Postal Service the previous Tuesday.
And on July 12th, 2019, you found that the pesticide storage was adequate because it followed the distance guidelines from the seller. Is that correct?
In July of 2018, yes, I did find that there were adequate pesticide storage.
My apologies on the confusion for that year there. Thank you for clarifying for me. You noted that the storage procedures didn't violate any rules, correct?
No, there was nothing imminently problematic with their procedure.
And on May 8th, in that 2019 in May, you gave a list of requirements for Mr. Martini to follow to ensure that his business remained open, correct?
Yes, and if he did not follow them, then I would be forced to put the Peony Estates on probation.
None of your findings were enough to deem Peony Estates to need to close their business, correct?
Oh, not entirely, no. If that happened in the initial investigation, then that would have been they would have to be a major cause for concern.
So just to clarify, the answer to my question is when you investigated and you gave those 4 things for Peony Estates to work on, you did not find reason to shut down their business because of unsanitary reasons, correct?
No, I simply put them on probation.
And you did not find enough reason, my apologies, in your last inspection, you yielded no grounds as well to shut down Peony Estates, is that correct?
No, in their last investigation, they'd seemed to have cleaned up the area. I'd noted there was a PowerPoint on how to educate their employees, and Mr. Martini walked me through all of the proper procedures, and based off of those conclusions that I made, I deemed it acceptable.
Thank you for your time this afternoon. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect examination?
No, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be able to step down.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Atkins O'Keefe. Do we have a second witness for the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff would like to call Danny Francazio to the stand.
You may proceed when you're ready, counsel.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name is Danny Francazio.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Francazio?
Well, I kind of run a world-renowned winery called Rosie and Pedro, and that has just been the love of my life for the last 15 years or so.
And what made you get into the wine business?
Well, I've always admired wine from a very young age, So in college, I decided to learn about the science of grapes. And so I majored in biology, like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell or whatever. But no one told me that making or getting a bio degree doesn't make any money. So I then got an MBA and bought a winery and settled down so I could immediately start making wine.
And Mr. Francazio, what experience do you have in the wine industry?
That's a good question. So aside from being a connoisseur of sorts, I also seem to know everything there is to know about the process of making wine. Harvesting, pressing, stemming, pouring, you name it, and I know it.
And what brings you to court today?
Well, there's also a much darker side of the magic to making grapes in this industry, and you have to get the process down to a T. Otherwise, you could seriously hurt or harm your customers. So I'm here to testify about such things for Peony Estates.
What is your relationship with Peony Estates?
Well, the owner actually, Harper Martini, used to work for me. He actually rose through the ranks pretty quickly and got to become manager at one point.
And what did Harper Martini do while working for you?
Oh, Harper did a lot of the groundwork around the winery, like pouring into barrels, basically monitoring for pests. And if we ever found pests, she would come directly to me, and then we would spray pesticides for those.
And did Harper ever participate in the use of pesticides while she worked for you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I want to say 5 or 6 times. He basically would help me with the process.
And what precautions do you have to take as an owner when you're using pesticides?
Well, I basically made it very clear to Harper that pesticides are very dangerous, and you have to make sure not to get them in any of your wine. Otherwise, it could be very serious. And that wasn't just good practice, it was also against the law to do otherwise.
And after all of this, what did Harper do?
Well, for whatever reason, he just like straight up quit on me out of nowhere and described this master plan of opening a rival winery. This was like, I want to say January of 2015, I believe.
All right, Mr. Francazio. Now, I want to bring your attention to August 2016. Were you in contact with Harper Martini at this time?
Well, I hadn't really heard anything from him up until this point, but out of nowhere, I just got this random email saying something like, haha, I hope you don't have sour grapes over me joining the business. And I was just disgusted to see that. Like, what a horrible wine joke, like, so I basically just decided to just, leave him on red, red. That's a good wine joke. But anyways, I just didn't respond.
And, Your Honor, may I present a piece of evidence right now to the court?
You may. Has it been previously admitted already?
No, I'm laying foundations for it right now.
Sure.
Thank you. And what is this, Mr. Francazio?
That is the email that I was just describing, where Harper basically emailed me.
Is it fair and accurate?
Yes, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Plaintiff now offers Exhibit 13 for evidence.
Any objection by the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 13 will be so admitted. You may continue, counsel.
Thank you. What did Harper say in her email, Mr. Francazia?
Well, basically, Harper was asking for help for some pests. And at this time, I knew the risks of not helping Harper, in the sense that if I hadn't helped them, someone could have seriously gotten injured or hurt. So I then responded.
What did you do after that?
Well, like I said, so I responded to this email and I said that they basically pesticides are very dangerous, which I'd already told them when they worked for me, and that if they got into wine, the person could get very sick or seriously hurt from just drinking, even if it was just a little bit.
And Your Honor, may I offer another piece of evidence right now?
You may. Has this also not been admitted?
Yes.
Okay.
And what is this, Mr. Francazia?
Let's see. This is another email that I responded to Harper, basically saying I was sorry to hear about what was going on, and basically that was my advice.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No, it is not.
Plaintiff now offers Exhibit 14 for evidence.
Defense, any objections?
No, Your Honor.
And Exhibit 14 is so admitted. You may continue.
Thank you. What did you tell Harper in the email, Mr. Francazia?
Well, I basically said that her issue was really serious and he just couldn't brush it off. So they basically needed to monitor all of their pesticide use and that anyone could get very sick from it.
And after you gave him this advice, did he ever send a follow-up email saying he followed your advice and implemented it?
I got no such email, so who knows, but I'm gonna go with no.
Now, Mr. Francazio, did you know about the wedding at Peony Estates on June the 8th, 2019?
Yeah, actually, I did. I was invited, but respectfully declined, and I got an email about it 1 month leading up to it from Harper, and he was basically saying that they were still having problems with pests, except this time it was much more urgent.
And Your Honor, may I offer another piece of evidence that has not been
You may,
pre-admitted?
counsel.
Thank you. And what is this, Mr. Francazio?
Well, this looks like the email that I sent to Harper talking about the wedding and basically just describing what I was telling Harper, that they apparently like failed an FDA inspection or something, and they were having issues with the bottling and storage, and they had like pesticides really close to it, which I was shocked to hear that. So once again, I sent an email giving Harper my advice.
And has this been changed or altered in any way?
No, it is not.
Plaintiff now offers Exhibit 17 for evidence.
Any objections, defense?
No, Your Honor.
This
Now-
exhibit is also admitted.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Francazio, what did Harper say to you in these emails exactly?
Well, like I was saying, he basically said that they had failed an FDA inspection and that they were basically cited for multiple issues, including the bottling facilities and the pesticide storage being stored very close to the bottling area.
So then what did you do about this?
Well, I told Harper that he needed to make 100% sure that all pesticides were cleaned from everything. I said that they had to specifically take steps such as cleaning down the bottling area, the storage facilities, all of it. Everything had to be wiped down because this was very serious. And if they didn't do something about it, someone could die.
And finally, Mr. Francazio, do you hate Harper Martini?
No, not at all. I mean, look, I feel really bad about what happened with her deciding to quit. And I was obviously really upset about it at the time. But Casey and Harper are like family to me. And, you know, there was only so much I could do with this. I gave them all the advice that I could. And it was really just up to them at that point.
And Casey and Genesis' safety means the world to you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Francazio.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Danny, you stumbled onto Midlands by chance, correct?
What do you mean?
Like, you didn't know anyone in the area. It said in your affidavit that you found Midlands while on a road trip, correct?
Yeah, it was the perfect spot. I had just graduated, gotten my MBA, and I found this winery and I bought it.
And not soon after, you hired Harper to be your cellar hand, correct?
Yes.
And you had even said that Harper was an instrumental part in putting Rosie and Pager on the map, correct?
Yeah, actually, since I had known so much about the process and Harper was a new recruit, I basically showed Harper everything I knew, and she really rose through the ranks under my guidance.
And Casey and Harper were like family to you, correct?
Absolutely.
And however, Harper had other plans and decided to quit on you, correct?
Yeah.
And you were upset that Harper betrayed you, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And after hearing about the pesticide issue, you had contacted a reporter to investigate them, correct?
Well, so after Harper had emailed me saying that they were running into issues with pests and pesticides, I knew that that was a serious issue and someone could get hurt. So I did what I thought was right at the time. And I did send the email I did send the email to somebody to check it out.
But instead of contacting a health professional, you contacted a reporter who reports publicly about certain businesses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you met Genesis, Casey Soto's fiance, correct?
Yes, actually I did. They planned on having a wedding at my place before moving it to Peony Estates.
Yes, but then then Harper had canceled that, and you were pretty upset when the venue had changed, correct?
Yeah, well, I understood, it made sense that Casey would want to keep it with the family. So obviously I was upset about it, but I understood what was going on at the time.
Okay. And one last question. The last conversation you had with Genesis, he had asked you about how to file a code for a violation against Peony Estates, correct?
Yeah.
Objection. Rule 802 hearsay.
Sure, counsel. Do you want to state the grounds for your objection?
Yes, Your Honor. This was. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Counsel, I don't know if you want to explain any further, or defense, you may respond.
No, his mic is off.
Yeah, I think you need to unmute, counsel.
I'm objecting to the usage of Genesis Petrio's statement as this information is not coming directly from the declarant.
Sure. All right. Defense counsel.
Well, Your Honor, this is stated in the in Danny's affidavit. And according to Rule 801, statements that are stated in an affidavit can be brought up before the court.
Well, counsel, could you point me to where in Rule 801 it says that?
801 1D, or sorry, D1.
801 D1. So we're talking about a declarant witness's prior statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have a reason for why you could be using this prior statement?
It is to set foundation that Genesis had been talking to Danny about filing a complaint against Peony Estates, which goes towards our theory of Genesis and Danny working together.
Your Honor, if I may.
Of course.
Your Honor, this is an out-of-court statement.
Yeah, counsel, you can continue.
This is an out-of-court statement, and therefore it applies to that this is in fact hearsay.
Can somebody proffer the exact statement for me?
Yes, Your Honor. It says in the affidavit that.
All right, it's counter counsel. I mean, what did the witness actually say? So let's keep it to what was said in court.
Okay. Do you want me to re-ask the question?
Sure. Or plaintiff's counsel, do you know what the exact phrase was that you were objecting to?
Jenna, I can't remember exactly. If
How about the witness? Do you want to repeat your answer?
Yeah. So I was basically, she asked me if it had to do something with Harper quitting my business, I believe.
Yeah. I'll give you one more response, defense. If not, I can also make a ruling. So I would tend to agree, plaintiff's counsel. This is an out-of-court statement that is being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Now, counsel, under Rule 801, you are correct. We could be using this if you were going to rebut an inconsistent statement. However, your question was not going to rebut an inconsistent statement. Rather, you were just asking for that out-of-court statement. And as you have not stated any grounds or exceptions or exemptions why we could hear that today, if you have one, I would welcome it. But if you do not, then I'm going to sustain this and strike that question from the record because it would be an out-of-court statement being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
Okay, Your Honor, just in lines 202 and 203 of the affidavit, it does state that it says that Genesis came up to me asking how to report a possible health code violation anonymously. And I was just confirming that he had stated that in his affidavit, but if not, we can strike this question.
Well, counsel, how about let's do it this way. You can ask about those facts themselves, I believe, without getting to the actual statements. So you can ask him if these things occurred. And then if he tells you no, then sure, we could use those statements to rebut that fact. But let's not use any hearsay to get to that. Let's just ask if these things happen. Does that work?
Yes.
You may continue, counsel.
Okay. Let me rephrase the question. So, Danny, had Genesis ever hinted about issues at the estate and not per se asked, but hinted towards possibly getting a code violation towards Peony Estates?
Yes. Yeah. Genesis basically asked me how to anonymously submit this, which makes sense because, conflict. Harper was going to be Genesis's father-in-law. So I'm assuming that's why they did it anonymously, and Genesis basically seemed really flustered by the whole thing. Like he knew something was up at Peony Estates.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect examination, counsel?
No, thank you, Your Honor. All I ask is that my witness may step down from the virtual stand.
You may get back to your winery, Mr. Fercazio.
Thank you.
And any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jameen Kwan to the stand.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hi, my name is Jameen Kwan.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Kwan?
I am an emergency room physician.
Now, we'll get back to that later. First, where did you go to school?
Well, I received my Bachelor of Science in Biology from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1993, then received my MD from the University of North Carolina School of Medicine in 1997. I later completed a fellowship at Emory University Hospital, Atlanta, while specializing in toxicology and emergency medicine.
And what is your experience in emergency medicine?
I worked at Midland St. Joseph Hospital as an emergency room physician, Sacred Heart of Midlands Hospital as a senior emergency room physician, and now I work at River Valley Hospital as the chief emergency room physician.
Have you ever been published?
Yes, I've published work on both toxicology and emergency medicine.
Now, what typically happens when a person walks into an emergency room?
The first thing that happens is my colleagues and I complete triage on the patient.
Explain triage.
Simply put, triage is the assignment of the order of patient treatment depending on the urgency of their illness or wounds.
What do you do next?
Next, we determine if there is an obvious cause of harm in order to form a preliminary diagnosis.
What do you do if the harm isn't obvious?
I then would do things such as order lab tests, consult with other doctors, and continue my observation in order to further update that preliminary diagnosis.
What do you do after you've formed a diagnosis?
We then begin an appropriate treatment of the patient.
And is this process of triage, diagnosis, and treatment standard procedure?
Yes, it is. It's used in every emergency room throughout the country.
And do you apply this method reliably?
Yes, I do, every time I'm working.
Were you working on the night of June 7th, 2019?
Yes, I was.
And did you treat Genesis Petrillo that night?
Yes, I first encountered Mr. Petrillo when he was brought into the hospital by the EMTs.
What did you notice?
When Mr. Petrillo entered the emergency room, he was vomiting profusely, and the friend that brought him in, I believe it was Angel Rodriguez, informed me that he had been vomiting since earlier that night.
What other symptoms did he have?
Whenever I spoke with Petrillo, he was able to convey to me that he had some pain or tightness in his chest. It was obvious that he had slowed breathing and slurred speech, nausea, vomiting, obviously as well. At a point when I was trying to transport him, he lost the ability to walk altogether, so I rushed to grab a wheelchair to transport him.
What did you do next?
I continued observation of Petrillo, and there were 3 additional symptoms that concerned me.
Explain the first one.
First, Mr. Petrillo's pupils were severely contracted.
What about the second?
Secondly, Mr. Petrillo exhibited involuntary muscle twitching and incontinence, or defecation, urinary defecation, involuntary urinary defecation.
Now explain the third.
Lastly, while typically someone who is intoxicated has a weak but rapid heart rate, Mr. Petrillo's pulse was slowed.
And what did this lead you to believe?
With these 3 additional symptoms I observed, I believe that Mr. Petrillo was suffering from something more than intoxication. I believed he was suffering from organophosphate poisoning.
Are organophosphates deadly?
Yes, they can be very deadly to humans as they inhibit the production of an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which can lead the nervous system to fail.
Is acetylcholinesterase levels how doctors typically diagnose this?
Yes, it is so closely correlated that it can be used to conclusively diagnose organophosphate pesticide exposure.
And did you run any tests on Mr. Petrillo?
Yes, I ran 2 tests during treatment.
And what were the results of those tests?
Objection. Hearsay.
Do you want to state your grounds for that objection, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. So these test results have not been admitted into evidence yet, so they can't be spoken about prior to laying the foundation.
Sure. Counsel, would you like to respond?
Your Honor, if I may, these two tests are labeled as Exhibits 5 and 6, which are pre-admitted per Stipulation 3.
Counsel, any response?
Okay, I did not realize that they were pre-admitted. I apologize.
Now, counsel, do you plan on using the actual physical exhibits themselves, or are you just going to be speaking about them?
Just speaking about the conclusions Dr. Kwan drew from them.
Sure. All right, then you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Overruled then.
Dr. Kwan, what did these tests tell you about Genesis Petrio's condition?
They indicated that organophosphate poison was present in his blood, and that the stomach contents was both wine and organophosphate poison.
So what did you conclude about Genesis Petrio's cause of death?
I concluded that Mr. Petrio most likely ingested wine contaminated with organophosphate poison on the evening of June 7th, 2019. The appearance of his symptoms perfectly matched the expected progression of a pesticide poisoning case, and these pesticides ultimately resulted in his death.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan, I just have a few questions for you.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
specialize in toxicology, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you have treated many suspected poisoning cases, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you say that pesticide use is extremely dangerous to humans?
Yes, it is very, very dangerous.
And you believe that organic methods are better than chemical pesticides, correct?
Yes, I do, especially after tragedies such as this.
You believe that chemical pesticides are a scourge to the environment and should be banned by legislators, correct?
Yes, I believe it's legislators' duty to protect citizens, and it would also have prevented a tragedy such as this.
So wouldn't this prejudicial opinion of yours have impacted your decision and your treatment of Mr. Petrio?
No, it would have not. I always apply proper treatment no matter who the patient is, no matter what they're suffering from. And although I do specialize in toxicology and have this experience with pesticides, I treat a myriad of different illnesses and wounds.
But you are on the board of directors for Doctors for Organic Solutions and are actively pursuing legislation against chemical pesticide use, correct?
Yes, I am. It is one of the many volunteer positions I take up in my free time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect examination?
No redirect. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down from the stand.
Dr. Kwan, you're excused. Thank you. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests its case in chief and asks for a brief recess.
Absolutely. How about 5 minutes? We are exactly at 3:25. Let's come back at 3:30 and we will continue.
Yes,
Thank you,
Your
Your
Honor.
Honor.
Sure. All right, everyone. Let's bring this courtroom back to order and proceed with the defense's case in chief. Is defense counsel ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we would like to call Austin Lewis to the stand.
You may proceed when you're ready.
Hello.
All right, Austin. What is the name? Oh, please state your name for the court.
Yes, my name is Austin Lewis.
All right. What is the nature of your employment at Peony Estates?
I've been called here because I'm the head winemaker for Peony Estates.
All right. And how long have you been working in the wine industry?
Oh, why? Winemaking is in my blood. It's been a family business, actually.
So what exactly happened to your family's winery?
Well, Old Man Cumberland, that was the name of the previous winery, he sold it to Danny Francasio in 2005. And Francasio basically took over everything.
Okay. What event followed Francasio's taking over your family's old winery?
Well, I continued to work there, and a few years later, he had fired Mom. Rest her soul. She died not long after. I reckon that the reason why Mother died was because of the stress of being out of a job. Danny also renamed it to Rosie and Pedro. And he denoted my father as well to a smaller position in the winery.
I'm so sorry to hear about your mother. Tell me more about Mr. Francasio.
Oh, I don't like him. He is, quite frankly, a very skeevy man, I would say. I'm not fond of that man.
And how did you meet Harper Martini?
Oh, he joined the winery a few years later while I had been working there. Him and I had immediately hit it off. A great relationship, still a great friend. I would trust him.
What was your perception to Danny's reaction to your leaving the winery with Harper?
Oh, Danny didn't like that. No, he was very infuriated. He called both of us traitors.
Your Honor, objection hearsay.
Counsel, do you have anything further, or would you like to hear a response?
Hearsay in that he called both of us traitors.
Sure. Response?
Respectfully, Your Honor, this statement was made in response to a startling event. It was an excited utterance under Rule 803, Section 2.
Counsel, do you have any response to her 803.2 exception?
Your Honor, if I may, this was made in the entire conversation. It cannot be expected that throughout this entire conversation, he was so excited that he happened to make this utterance. This does not fall under that rule, and this is hearsay.
I would tend to agree, counsel. Defense counsel, can you explain to me what foundation has been laid to tell us that there was, in fact, some sort of exciting event that created a condition in which he was excited?
Yes, Your Honor. The event was that Harper and Austin would be leaving the winery, and that caused Danny to react in such a way that he would call them traitors. So that is an excited utterance.
Counsel, I will tend to say I think that's stretching the rule a little too far. I think that a statement being shocking in of itself might be stretching the rule a bit too far here. So I'm going to agree and sustain the objection and strike the question from the record. But you may ask a question regarding the materials if you can do so without eliciting hearsay.
All right. Austin, when did you first begin to use pesticides on the crops around the foundations of the wine production buildings?
Oh, we started using those as soon as we saw bugs, and bugs were there day one.
All right. And when did you first begin to use pesticides in your interior spaces?
In October 2015, we started using the pesticides in the interior spaces. I gave all of my employees training manuals. I instructed them to change into fresh clothes after using the pesticides and wash their hands thoroughly before they would come back to wine production.
Okay. Was there anything concerning to you about the use of pesticides on the vines in particular?
On the vines, yes. In 2016, there was a slope issue with the water and the drainage. Some of the pesticides that we had sprayed over the vineyards would land into the water, and the water would slope down, and it could possibly and quite frankly made its way down to the cellar.
All right. Was there a difference between the grapes that were grown on the bottom of the slope versus the grapes that were grown on the top of the slope in terms of how much water they would absorb?
Yes, the grapes on the bottom of the slope would inherit more water than the ones on the top of the slope, yes.
And so did you believe that there was a threat with regard to how much pesticides certain grapes would absorb?
Yes.
And how did you seek to combat this potential threat?
Well, we decided to use the certain pesticides, and we attempted to make sure that everything was sprayed equally, and that including the slope, everything was relatively equally sprayed.
And did you end up using all of the grapes that were grown in your wines?
No, we did not. I threw about, I'd say 20% of our grapes away. Harper was not fond of that, but I just wanted to be safe and careful, yes.
Good. When did you begin mandatory annual training on proper use and storage of pesticides?
Mandatory training. I would say that began in 2015, yes, when I began instructing all my employees with training manuals.
All right. And are you familiar with the investigative journalist Lonnie Pross?
Oh, yes, I know Lonnie.
In what context did you interact with her?
She has been particularly very, very disguised lady, I would say, to put it in kind terms. She has continued to approach Peony Estates and try to investigate our wineries. And I don't like that, as that is illegal.
Okay. Are you aware of an event that happened on May 8th, 2019?
Yes, in May 8th. That was when the certain inspector, he came.
Okay. Did you have prior knowledge of this surprise inspection?
No, as it was a surprise inspection, we were not sure of it.
Okay. How do you believe the bottle of Cara wine which Genesis drank became contaminated?
I would suppose that we had kept pesticides relatively close to that bottle of Cara wine, and must have been our employees. They were a little negligent in moving the bottle from the pesticide.
Okay. Are you aware of any instances, though, when pesticide leaked or spilled?
I believe the slope issue that I had already talked about, that was a primary issue of pesticides leaking into the water and into the cellars, yes.
But not leaking or spilling into any of the wines in particular?
No, none of the wine.
All right. And one final question. What would happen to you if P&A Estates were to shut down?
Oh, I'd be devastated. I joined Harper. We started this business together. I own about 10% of the company as well. I love this company. I'm making wine, especially with one of my friends. I'd be devastated.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Lewis, you've been in the wine business since 2012, isn't that correct?
I would go as further because Mother was always in the business. I grew up learning about wine ever since childhood days.
Of course, but you worked at Danny Francosio's winery first, didn't you?
Yes,
Until you switched to Harper Martini's winery in 2015,
of course.
because she offered you the job as the head winemaker.
Yes,
This job came with a substantial raise, didn't it?
yes, of course.
And it came with a 10% stake in Peony Estates.
Yes, in which I
And
still own.
you had a lot of debt, didn't you?
I would say so. I joined primarily because I just wanted to get out of that place with Danny.
Of course, but your mother left you a lot of debt, did she not?
Yes,
And so this raise and the 10% stake in Peony Estates was helpful, wasn't it?
of course.
Now, moving on, Peony Estates is next to the swamp, is it not?
Yes, dreadful place, that swamp.
There's a lot of pests near the swamp.
Oh, bugs, flies. If anything likes grapes, we have it in droves.
And so you had to deal with pests in the winery, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And at first you used organic pesticides to try to get rid of these pests.
Yes, and they weren't working very well.
So they didn't work.
I would say they did work for a period, but no.
So you had to switch to chemical pesticides, isn't that right?
Yes.
And the brand of pesticides you use is Bug Off.
Yes, bug off.
And this is the only brand of pesticides you use, is not correct?
Yes, now it is.
Now, Mr. Lewis, you know the dangers of pesticides, don't you?
Of course, yes, I'm well read.
In fact, your coworker Kirby almost died from drinking just a little bit of pesticides.
That was quite an event, yes.
And you talked to Harper about the winery's pesticide use.
Yes, I did.
And he was annoyed that you brought this up.
Yes, he thought I was relatively, how do I say, over exaggerative of the precautions.
He was angry that you brought up the pesticide use.
It might have come to that, yes.
He said that pesticide use isn't a big deal.
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, if I
Pause
may,
down. You may.
this is a statement made by the party representative.
So counsel, why would that allow it to be heard in court?
Because as it is made by the party representative and it is the defendant's party representative, statements by that party representative are allowed.
Counsel, any response on that?
I believe that the rule that she's referencing states that a party opponent's statement can only be utilized on a matter within the scope of that relationship between the party's agent and the employee. And the statement can be considered, but it does not itself establish the declarant's authority under the rule.
Counsel, any brief response?
Your Honor, if I may, this also, if it were hearsay, could fall under Rule 801 D2, which is an exception to hearsay, in which is employee in a scope of employment. These two employees of Peony Estates are discussing the business at Peony Estates and practices within employment.
Now, can you remind me who exactly said the statement?
Harper Martini, Your Honor.
Harper Martini. And can you remind me, what is Harper Martini's relationship to Peony Estates?
Harper Martini is the owner of Peony Estates.
Now, counsel, which is Peony Estates or is Harper Martini the opposing party in this case, or are both?
Peony Estates is the party representative in this case.
Now, I only ask that because I am actually genuinely curious whether or not the fact that you're pursuing this claim, does that mean that you are suing Harper Martini, or are you suing Peony Estates, or both?
We are suing Harper Martini and Peony Estates for negligence.
And counsel, do you disagree with that at all? Defense or
Your Honor,
defense counsel?
I believe the rules state that on negligence per se, the plaintiff will pursue damages from Peony Estates and not Harper Martini.
Yes, Your Honor, sorry, I misspoke. I meant that it is just Peony Estates, which is involved in this case.
Sure, but can you remind me, or can you proffer, is Harper Martini an owner of Peony Estates?
She is, and in this, she's acting in the scope of employment.
So therefore, I will sustain your objection. I believe that you have correctly cited that rule and that this would be, I'm going to overrule the objection. I believe you have correctly responded that this would fall under 801D2. It is an opposing party statement because, as you have said, she is the owner of Pena Estates. That is who you are suing. And so therefore, that rule would allow for you to go into these statements. Please continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may continue, Harper Martini said that a little bit of pesticide isn't a big deal. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And that nobody ever dies from it?
Yes.
Now, Harper Martini even forbade you from retraining your employees. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And so all you could do was put up signs reminding employees to wash their hands. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I was diligent about that.
Now, Mr. Lewis, you still own 10% stake in Peony Estates, don't you?
Of course I do.
And if Peony Estates were to lose this case, you would lose that 10% stake, would you not?
Most definitely.
And you would lose your job as head winemaker?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect examination?
Just one, Your Honor.
Sure.
Just one question for you, Austin Lewis. Wouldn't you say that a higher stake in Peony Estates as well as a raise would cause you to do everything in your power to make sure that the company is not acting negligently?
Yes, of course. I completely agree with that statement. That is why I instructed my employees to be so careful about their conduct around the pesticides in the wine.
All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross examination?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Sure. Mr. Lewis, you are excused.
Thank you.
Thank you. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Okay. Just one moment. Sorry. Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Dr. Rebecca Cannon to the stand.
You may proceed when you're ready, counsel.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Cannon. I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Will you please state your name for the court?
My name is Dr. Rebecca Cannon.
And Dr. Cannon, what is your education?
I received a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from The Ohio State University. I then went on to receive an MD with an emphasis in toxicology from Harvard Medical School.
And what is your experience in this field?
I'm a medical expert in toxicology and pharmacology. I was the chief toxicologist at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. Then I took a faculty position at Midlands Medical School. I'm currently an associate consultant for Gardner Consulting Incorporated based in California.
And ma'am, if you don't mind, will you please list your licensing and publication for me?
Yes, I am currently licensed to practice medicine in California, Midlands, Illinois, Wyoming, and Florida.
Have you ever testified before in court?
Yes, I have testified in over 35 legal cases, all of them for the defense, 30 in civil matters.
How did you go about investigating the incident before the matter in court today?
I reviewed the report of Dr. Kwan, the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, and exhibits 5, 6, 7, 10, and 23.
Did you run any tests or examine the body of Mr. Petrillo?
No, I did not get to examine the body. It was cremated before I could examine it. However, that's all right. I did not need to see it in order to make it an accurate report. Tests weren't necessary either. This isn't part of my standard role as a consultant to run extra tests. That's the job of the physician.
What did you conclude from looking at Dr. Kwan's reports?
To my understanding, before
Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor. Under 702C, we have not heard that any conclusions are based on reliable principles and methods, and therefore this expert is not qualified to make such conclusions under Rule 702.
Sure. Counsel, can you quickly repeat your question again for me?
Yes, Your Honor. It was what conclusions were drawn by Dr. Cannon based on the necessary tools that she has already testified to using to draw her conclusions.
So would you like to respond to the objection?
Well, yes, Your Honor. My response would be that I have already laid the foundation with Dr. Cannon that she has used the report of Dr. Kwan in those exhibits to draw her conclusions and established her credentials.
And counsel, could you proffer what reliable principle or method have you told the court that Dr. Cannon used?
Your Honor, if I may confer with my co-counsel for just a brief moment.
Of course.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I ask a clarification question?
Of course.
Are you asking specifically what the method Dr. Cannon used to reach her conclusions?
Well, yes, counsel, you told me that you did lay the foundation. However, plaintiff's counsel is asserting that you have not, under 702C, that we have not heard a reliable principle or method. And I tend to agree that we haven't heard that yet. So I'm giving you one chance to proffer to me what has been heard that I missed.
May I ask a follow-up question before asking what she concluded to determine her methods that were used in this case?
Absolutely, counsel. So I'll sustain the objection and strike the question from the record. Please lay the foundation and then we'll continue.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Cannon, can you explain the methods that you used in investigating the death of Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, so chiefly what I did is I reviewed the report by Dr. Kwan. I went through and looked at what she did, and from her report, I have come up with several other options that could be reasonably stated as causes of death.
And what did you conclude?
Objection. Your Honor, at this time, I would ask to re-raise my objection. Although that was an answer to prong B of 702, that she has used facts and data, we still have not heard of a method, more or less one that is peer-reviewed or reliable.
Counsel, you may respond.
Your Honor, I would state that is the method that Dr. Cannon explicitly stated she reviewed Dr. Kwan's examination and is going to explain her conclusions based on that, which is the method she used.
Sure, counsel, I understand she's told us what she did, but I believe 702, as plaintiff's counsels point out, is very clear. We need to know exactly how she did what she did and if how she did what she did was reliable. So she could tell us what kind of method was her review. Did she just read this? Did she use a 5-step process? Is there a test that's widely used in her field that other doctors agree is widely used? If she could tell us things like that, that would be helpful. So I'm going to sustain the objection and ask for further foundation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, what is the standard for procedure for you as a consultant in your field when you review specific data?
As a consultant in my field, it's very common that I do not get to see the body or anything like that. I specifically take the documents that are involved in the case and I read through those and I review them and I look at the processes that they take. And from that, I can draw reasonable conclusions.
Is that standard practice for you?
Yes, that is.
Are you able to draw clear and honest conclusions based on reviewing the documents of other experts?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Will you please outline what you concluded based on reading Dr. Kwan's testimony?
Objection. Your Honor, I'm going to have to re-raise my 702C objection, although she has stated, and I would proffer has fulfilled the prong of 702D, that it was applied to the case. She did use in this case. We have still not heard prong 702C, which is that this method is reliable. Therefore, she is still unqualified to give an expert opinion under Rule 702.
Now, plaintiff's counsel, do you have any case law that could help the court in determining what exactly 702C tells us?
Yes, Your Honor. On page 3 of your case law packet, towards the middle, there is a case law titled Tarot Readers versus Merle Dow. This lists a dispositive list of factors that are relevant to determining if a method is reliable under 702C. And because we have not heard a single one of these factors, I would ask you to find this method unreliable.
Brief response, defense counsel.
May I ask for the plaintiffs to repeat that case name? I was not able to look at the brief provided to the bench prior to the proceeding.
Yeah, sure, counsel. I have it pulled up. So it's Tarot Readers Association of Midlands versus Merrill Dow on page 3, in which plaintiff's counsel has cited that there's a dispositive test which says that we can use such things as whether it's been subject to peer review, whether it has a known error rate, widespread acceptance in the field as factors to determine whether 702C has been met. Do you have a response to that argument?
Yes, Your Honor. May I confer with co-counsel for a brief second?
You may.
I appreciate that.
Counsel, for the sake of time, because we are on a limited time basis, I will go ahead and make a ruling. I'm going to sustain the objection and ask that you do ask one more question. That if you're able to find that wording under Tarot Card Readers Association, would be very narrowly tailored so that we can hear whether or not this method that she used has widespread acceptance in her field. If you can ask that question and she can answer that question, then I will consider the foundation to have been laid. Plaintiff's counsel, would you agree that that would satisfy your objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then let's continue on that basis. Sustained, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, if I may ask maybe perhaps 2 follow-up questions in order to do so?
Absolutely, yes.
Dr. Cannon, do you have any publications in your field that relate to the accuracy of the test that you have used?
Yes, I have authored more than 50 published articles on the issues of toxicology, medicine, and treatment.
And these standard practices, have they been deemed, these publications, have they been deemed any peer review articles or anything that have also been sufficiently accepted by other experts in your field?
Yes.
Now, will you please explain the conclusions that you drew from Dr. Kwan's testimony?
Your Honor, objection under 702C. I don't argue that her publications, which would fall under 702A, have been peer reviewed, but we are talking to the method that was specifically applied in today's case.
Now, counsel, I'll go ahead and make a ruling right away. I do appreciate your objection, and I believe that you are very laser focused on the nuance. However, I do believe that she stated briefly in there that others have spoken about her method as being accepted. I believe that we did get it out on the record, and although the court will offer an opinion that that is quite a low bar, that perhaps more foundation could be necessary and maybe this should be preserved for appeal, we're going to let it in. You may continue with the conclusions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, I'm going to go ahead and ask you that question again. Can you please explain your conclusions that you drew from the report of Dr. Kwan?
Yes. To my understanding, the general public, before I became involved in this case, was convinced that Genesis Petrillo drank a bottle of wine that was laced with organophosphate pesticide, thus killing her. However, I disagree with this conclusion. There are many other possibilities that just cannot reasonably be disregarded.
And what was your first conclusion that you were able to draw from that?
My first conclusion that there was a possibility that Ms. Petrillo died of alcohol poisoning due to fatal respiratory arrest. She had many symptoms of alcohol poisoning when she was admitted to the hospital, and her blood alcohol content was 0.6. That's the level she reached when she was admitted. However, because the liver breaks down alcohol in the bloodstream steadily after peak concentration, it is highly likely that she had a much higher concentration during the night.
So is it possible that Miss Petrio's blood alcohol concentration could have reached a deadly level prior to any investigation by an expert or before receiving medical attention?
Yes. So generally, where it becomes deadly is at 0.3. Because this test was not run until I believe it was 3 in the morning, and she was admitted the call for 911 was made at 12:42. That's a 2-hour span in which her BAC could have very heavily declined.
And what was the second conclusion that you reached as a possible cause of death?
The second conclusion I reached was that she could have had an allergic reaction. I understand, based on the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, that there was a buffet at the wedding that had many different types of food.
Were there any other possible conclusions that you drew?
Yes, there was another conclusion I found quite possible. She had hepatic disease. While there is nothing in her chart that has said so, she did not have regular checkups for 2 years before. So it is quite possible that a couple weeks prior, she had developed hepatic disease, and that this is what caused her death.
Based on your findings, would you conclude with reasonable scientific certainty that there was something other than organophosphate poisoning that caused Ms. Petrio's death?
Yes, I would conclude with reasonable scientific certainty that there are other possibilities that just cannot be disregarded at this time.
And were these possibilities ruled out by Dr. Kwan in their investigation?
I do not believe so.
Thank you for your time. That's all the questions I have.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Now, Dr. Cannon, first, you considered that Mr. Petrio could have died of alcohol poisoning, correct?
Yes.
However, Dr. Kwan measured Mr. Petrio's BAC to be about 0.16%, correct?
That is true. However, as stated earlier, that was not the peak for the day. The peak would have been much higher, as there was about a 2-hour window from the time she was admitted to the hospital to when the test was taken.
And you argue that this higher BAC to kill him would have had to be about 0.3%.
That is true, and it is quite reasonably possible that she had this high of a BAC at some point throughout the night.
However, you would also agree that there is no evidence to support that Mr. Petrio's BC reached 0.3%.
There is no evidence for or against it.
And there is no scientific basis that Mr. Petrio's BAC reached 0.3%.
There is no basis that it reached 0.3% specifically, but there is a scientific basis that it was at a much higher level at some point throughout the night.
Is there a scientific basis that it reached a level high enough to kill Mr. Petrio?
That cannot be stated with absolute certainty.
So there is no scientific basis.
No, ma'am.
Now, you also for alcohol poisoning, there is some overlap in symptoms of alcohol poisoning and organophosphate poisoning, correct?
Correct.
However, alcohol poisoning doesn't explain Mr. Petrio's low acetylcholinesterase levels, does it?
It does not.
And it doesn't explain the fact that there were pesticides found in his system.
No, ma'am, it does not.
And organophosphate poisoning explains both of those, correct?
Correct.
And you also made conclusions about hepatic disease.
I did.
And normally, this disease would cause jaundice, correct?
Correct.
However, there was no jaundice observed by Dr. Kwan in this case.
You are correct.
And this disease would also not account for the levels of pesticides in his system.
You are correct.
And organophosphate poisoning, again, would account for that.
Yes.
Dr. Cannon, you work for a medical consulting firm?
I do.
And one of that firm's main clients is Rusty Roach and Rodent Killers.
Objection to relevance, Your Honor. May I briefly be heard?
Yes, you may.
The client that the opposing counsel is referring to has nothing to do with the type of pesticide used at Peony Estates.
Sure, counsel response.
Yes, Your Honor. Both the pesticides this company makes and the pesticides used in Peony Estates are chemical pesticides, and this is going towards the bias of Dr. Cannon in her testimony today.
Would you like to proffer a little further what exact bias you're trying to elicit?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon was told that pesticides could not be found the cause of this death. Therefore, it does show bias, and relevance is a low bar.
Your Honor,
counsel.
yes, thank you. In that case, if the opposing counsel is trying to elicit the fact that Dr. Cannon was told something, that would be hearsay, and it's an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted that we do not have the availability to have testified in court today.
You may respond, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. We would not be offering these statements for the truth of the matter asserted, rather that they affected Dr. Cannon's subsequent actions, which again goes to bias, which is relevant in today's proceedings.
Yeah, counsel, I do tend to say I am skeptical, especially if this company is not directly involved. However, you are sort of opening a pathway to which I could see this being relevant. And as the bar is low, I will overrule and allow it. However, counsel, please do re-object if she is not able to fulfill her high promises. So we'll overrule and we shall continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Cannon, I'll restate my question. One of the biggest clients for the consulting company you work for is Dusty Roach and Rodent Killers, correct?
Yes, one of their clients is this roach and rodent killer.
And they make chemical pesticides.
They do.
And you were told that chemical pesticides could not be found as Petrio's cause of death.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor. That is a statement, out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Your
Counsel
Honor, if I may.
response.
I am not offering the fact that Petrio did not die of pesticides for the truth of the matter asserted, rather that it informed Dr. Cannon's subsequent actions in her investigation of this case.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
The opposing counsel is linking the fact that Dr. Cannon was told pesticides cannot be a cause of death to the bias, which is a direct correlation to the reasoning for this line of questioning, which would be offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor, if I may.
You may.
Although this statement is connected to her bias, I am not arguing that this statement has any inherent truth value. Therefore, it is not hearsay.
Now, counsel, correct me if I'm wrong, the foundation was laid that this other chemical company is one of her clients, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, have you, and in doing so, I'm assuming that the foundation has been laid that there is some sort of monetary relationship between them. And so you're trying to say that there is influence from this other person saying that this does not cause death, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure. For that limited purpose, I will allow the hearsay. However, we will instruct the jury not to take it for the truth of the matter, that pesticides do not indeed cause death. She can, not testify to that with this statement. However, we will allow it for the limited purposes of bias, seeing that foundation was narrowly laid.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Cannon, I'll just re-ask my question. You were told that pesticides could not be found responsible for Mr. Petrio's death, correct?
That is correct. However, I did remain objective throughout my entire investigation.
And you would agree that the most likely cause of death in this case is pesticide poisoning.
Just because something is most likely does not mean that it is what has occurred.
However, you would agree that it is most likely.
Yes, I would.
And you also agree that it is most likely that the source of this pesticide was from the wine Genesis drank on June 7th at Peony Estates.
I do agree with that, but as I have asserted earlier, just because something is most likely does not mean it is what occurred, and there is many other options that cannot be disregarded at this time.
That's a yes to my question?
That's a yes to your question.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect examination?
Your Honor, the defense does not have any redirect at this time. I just ask that my witness be allowed to step down from the stand.
Sure thing. Thank you for your time, Dr. Cannon.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cannon.
Any further witnesses for the defense?
Yes, counsel. The defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
You may proceed when you're ready, counsel.
Hi, Blair. Please state your name. Oh, wait. Oh, there she is. Sorry. Please state your name for the court.
Hi, my name is Blair Osborne.
And what is your occupation?
I work as a private event planner in Rapid River Valley Midlands. I am the CEO, CFO, and all other relevant executive roles required of my position as the owner and founder of Bliss by Blair Events.
And what is your experience in this field?
I have decades of success arranging intimate events for friends and family, and I founded my business in 2011, and since then have hosted many of various types of events, 83 of which have been at Peony Estates.
And to go further into your affiliation with Peony Estates, can you tell me more about your interactions with this company?
I first became affiliated with Peony Estates in the spring of 2015. I met Harper when he saved me. I needed an alternate venue for one of my events, and since then I have had many successful events at Peony Estates, especially weddings.
Okay. And can you go further into the business relationship?
Due to the many events that I've hosted at Peony Estates, I've built a very good rapport with the employees there. Needless to say, I was so happy when Harper asked me to plan the wedding for Casey and Genesis. It's so sad that it ended the way it did. There was such negative energy.
Mm-hmm. How many events did you hold at Peony Estates?
About 83 events.
Wow. Lastly, in all 83 of your events, did you ever notice any health violations?
No, I did not.
And sorry, one more question. Would you ever work somewhere, or would you have ever gone back if there had been any health code violations?
Oh no, I would not want my business to be associated with anywhere that had health code violations.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to point out one thing. I'm experiencing some technical difficulties, so I may disconnect by accident.
No problem, counsel. We understand.
Hello, Miss Osborne.
No.
Now, you struggled to stay organized when you started out as a new event planner, correct?
I did, yes.
In the spring of 2015, you met Harper Martini, the owner of Peony Estates, for the first time when you were desperate for an alternative venue after an organizational mishap, right?
Yes, I had two events that ended up overlapping, and Harper saved the day.
So you would say she came to your rescue, right?
Yes.
And this was the beginning of a successful partnership over the next 4 years, right?
Yes, it was very successful.
And in fact, since then, as you said before, you've planned 83 events at Peony Estates.
I did, yes. They all have run very smoothly.
And you were the wedding planner for Harper's daughter, Casey, and her husband, Genesis.
I was so touched when Harper thought of me to plan the wedding.
And you knew Harper and her family so well that when you were planning for it, it felt like planning for family.
That is correct.
And do you believe that Harper Martini, the owner of Peony Estates, could have ever been involved in Genesis' death, no matter what evidence is brought forward?
No, I do not. Harper loved Casey so much, and he just wanted what was best for him.
Now, Miss Osborne, a few days after the wedding at wedding party at Black Bear Casino, you discussed table placements with Harper Martini, right?
I did, yes.
Objection, relevance.
Counsel, what's your grounds for that?
Your Honor, I'm about to lay out the relevance right now. This is pertaining currently to a conversation and exchange that will take place.
Counsel, do you have any response?
Well, just a reminder that we're talking about negligence in this case and the relationship between Harper and Blair outside of the health code violations is not relevant to this case.
Counsel,
Your Honor?
Yeah, Counsel, I can go ahead and make a ruling. I believe you might be correct about that. However, relevance is a low bar, especially when we're laying foundation. It sounds like it's for that. If he goes into a path that is clearly not relevant, you may re-object. But for now, I think we're okay. So overruled.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, during that, was there a did Mr. Martini have a conversation, a tense exchange over the phone with someone?
Yes, he did.
And during that phone call, did Harper Martini, the owner of Peony Estates, angrily declare, "I don't care what that clown Adkins O'Keefe says"?
Yes, Harper did say that.
And right after that, Mr. Martini also told the other person on the line to not waste any time training employees, correct?
That is correct.
And that everyone should focus on the wedding and not bother at all to move the pesticides or the carawine from their places.
That is correct, yes.
Now, Miss Osborne, during the rehearsal dinner, did Harper Martini present Genesis Petrillo with a wine bottle from the cellar of Peony Estates?
Yes, Harper did present Genesis with the wine. It was such a sweet gesture.
And while giving that bottle, she said that this was a special bottle that she had planned to give just for him, correct?
Yes, it was a way to smooth things over in their rocky relationship.
Now, in turn, right after this, did you see Genesis Petrillo drink the wine from that bottle?
Yes, I did.
And did you see anyone else drink the wine from that bottle?
I don't believe I did. No.
And after this, when you were leaving Peony Estates, you met Genesis Petrillo. And in regards to the quantity of alcohol that he had drunk, you believe that he seemed fine and that you were not worried about him.
Yes, I told Genesis to drink some water and go to bed. Due to the many weddings I have planned, I am generally I have a good eye for how drunk somebody is.
But in sum, you were not worried about him, correct?
No, I was not worried.
And now, after Genesis died, you decided to distance your business from Peony Estates, correct?
I did, yes.
And since June 8, 2019, you haven't held a single event at Peony Estates, right?
No, I have not. I thought it was best for my business that I didn't hold any more events at Peony Estates for now.
Now your new main venue is Rosie and Pedro, where for the past year you have held most of your weddings, correct?
That is correct.
And finally, when it comes to the hygiene and safety standards at Rosie and Pedro, besides your belief, you aren't actually able to speak to the hygiene and safety standards there, correct?
No, I cannot speak to it.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Anything further, counsel?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests its case.
All right. Well, you may be excused, Ms. Osborne. The defense has rested their case in chief. That brings us to closing arguments. I believe that we are okay on time to go ahead and maybe take a 5-minute recess. Although I don't like numbers that don't end in zeros and fives. So let's go ahead and do 4:25. We will come back for closing arguments. I'll see you all back then.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
All right, it is 4:25. Let's bring this court back into order. Are we ready to proceed with closing arguments?
Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
What about defense counsel?
Defense is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
All right, plaintiff, you may proceed at will.
May it please the court. An accident waiting to happen. June 7th, 2019 should have been the happiest day of Genesis Petrillo's life, but he never made it. He never said his vows. He never even took another breath. Because on June 7th, he took a deadly sip. He didn't know what was in that bottle. He didn't know there were pesticides, pesticides that should not have been there, pesticides that were deadly, pesticides that were there because of that defendant's actions, and pesticides that cost him his life. That is why we, the estate of Genesis Petrillo, have filed a claim against Peony Estates for negligence. As plaintiff, we bear the burden of proof, and we had to meet this burden by a preponderance of the evidence, or simply more likely than not. Now, as the judge will tell you today, the specific claim we are dealing with is negligence per se. We had to prove that Peony Estates broke safety statutes, and as a result, Genesis Petrillo suffered harm. And we have proved that. We have proved that Peony Estates broke safety statutes intended to keep people safe from pesticides. And as a result, Genesis lost his life. We have met our burden. This was an accident waiting to happen. So let's talk about it. You heard the evidence. You know this was an accident waiting to happen. Starting back in 2015, Miss Riley O'Keefe visited Peony Estates, and you heard from her that there were problems with how they were handling pesticides. They were storing them too close to the bottling area and too close to the kitchen. And she told you the problem with that, the danger of contamination. And what's more, when Miss O'Keefe returned in 2019, she didn't find one health code violation. She didn't find 2 or 3 health code violations. No, she found 4. She found open canisters of pesticides in the bottling area. And when she asked employees how to properly store pesticides, pesticides that could kill someone, they didn't have an answer. And what's more is on a shelf right next to a canister of pesticides, there was a bottle of 2019 Cara wine. And when Miss O'Keefe realized that that was dangerous, and she told an employee to dispose of that bottle immediately. But when she returned on May 23rd, 22 days later, there was a bottle in that exact same spot, the exact same bottle of wine. Now, the defendant told you that they did all they could, but that bottle of Cara wine, that same one that Miss O'Keefe saw next to the canister of pesticides, that's the same type of wine that Genesis drank on June 7th. That landed him in the emergency room, where Dr. Kwan observed that he had symptoms of pesticide poisoning. Now, Dr. Kwan did everything he could, but it was too late. And Genesis Petrillo passed away. But Dr. Kwan followed up. He ran some tests, and those tests told him what he had already suspected. Genesis had died of pesticide poisoning. And what's more, you heard from Danny Francasio, who told you that he had to remind the owner of Peony Estates, Harper Martini, repeatedly that pesticides were dangerous, that storing them properly was important because pesticides could kill someone. It was an accident waiting to happen. But the real tragedy today is that Genesis Petrillo should still be here. He should be married and living a happy life. But he's not, because of that defendant's actions. They broke safety statutes that put people at risk, put Genesis at risk. They killed him. Find them liable. Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to proceed?
You may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honors, opposing counsel, members of the jury. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. A common theme that we have seen throughout all of the witnesses that have testified today. Something that the prosecution's witnesses could not deny, as the prosecution's ultimate goal was to prove by preponderance of the evidence that Harper Martini and Peony Estates were liable. They could not do so. They could not meet that burden of proof. Good afternoon. My name is Julia Robertson, and I, along with my co-counsels, Lauren Sager and Aaron Cooper, who rise on behalf of Peony Estates in this negligence claim, ask the court to find Peony Estates not liable for the negligence that eventually, and for the unfortunate incident that occurred with Mr. Genesis Petrillo. The prosecution, or the plaintiff called their witnesses. First, you heard from Riley Adkins O'Keefe, the inspector of the estate. Miss O'Keefe concluded that Mr. Martini cleaned up his act, that he followed the instructions that she gave him to keep the estates clean, and found no grounds for closing the estates due to uncleanliness. Next, Mr. Danny Francasio, who used to work with Mr. Martini, who started a business after working for Mr. Francasio, who took business from Mr. Francasio, and that upset him. Mr. Danny Francasio was unable to forgive and forget. He let his jealousy, he let the betrayal that he felt inside of him bother him to the extent that he reported Mr. Martini to an outside source to try to get his business taken away from him. Upset that he even took the venue of his own child's wedding that he was allowed to do because he was upset that he was taking his business. Last, you heard from Dr. Kwan, an expert who testified to being against the use of pesticides in any form, and who still could not rule out other possible causes of death. The defense called our witnesses. First, Austin Lewis, who worked tirelessly to ensure the smooth running of Peony Estates, who noted Danny Francasio's disrespect to the old staff when he took over Rosie and Pedro, and who did everything he could to work hard and make sure that Peony Estates was up and running, who cared about the usage of pesticides at Peony Estates. Next, from Dr. Cannon, who testified that she could not rule out other causes of death besides organophosphate poisoning based on the testimony heard by the plaintiff's witness, Dr. Cannon. And last, from Blair Osborne, not only a personal friend to Mr. Martini, but the wedding planner who worked day by day tirelessly to make sure there was a nice, smooth wedding for the two, and who also testified that after performing many ceremonies at Peony Estates, could not conclude that there was uncleanliness present. With the conclusion of today's trial, the defense comes forth today to ask that the jury find that the plaintiff has not met its burden of proof, that by preponderance of the evidence that Peony Estates is liable for negligence, for the negligent use of pesticides, and that rather it was Danny Francasio who ultimately caused this terrible, terrible incident to occur. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Rebuttal from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Members of the jury, you didn't hear today that Danny Francasio had anything to do with the death of Genesis Petrillo. Let's talk about what you did hear. You heard from Austin Lewis, one of the employees at Peony Estates who is in charge of pesticide safety. I suppose we were a little negligent moving the bottles. You also heard the owner, Harper Martini, say, don't bother moving the pesticides. A little bit of pesticides aren't a big deal. There's the negligence. There's where they broke statutes. And you also heard from the defense's own expert, Dr. Cannon, that not a single cause of death she could come up with accounted for the pesticides found in Genesis Petrillo's symptoms. Therefore, the only possible cause of death is the conclusion both Dr. Kwan and Dr. Cannon reached was that organophosphate pesticide poisons killed him. There's the harm. We have shown that Peony Estates broke safety statutes, and as a result, Genesis Petrillo died. Find them liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Well, that will close out our trial for today, everyone. Give myself and my fellow scoring judge a few moments to finish up our ballots, and then I will have, if you all would like, we can all turn on our cameras and have a discussion about what happened today. We can give our comments. No pressure whatsoever to put your cameras on or stay. I competed, so I understand if you want to go, you can go. But if you'd like to hear, I would be happy to comment on what happened. So give us a few moments and we'll be right back. All right, everyone, ballots are off, and I'll welcome my fellow judge, Andrew Patterson, since I've been talking a lot. Introduce yourself, say what you'd like to say, and I'll go away for a bit.
As I said, my name's Andrew Patterson. I'm a 2L down at Baylor Law. I did mock trial all throughout undergrad, and I coached the team, the undergrad team here at Baylor. Overall, I thought it was like a really good round, especially, I'm guessing, is this y'all's first tournament of the season so far? Nice. Yeah, so especially for first tournament season, thought y'all are at a good starting point. Just kind of like some big kind of like big picture comments from just someone that's like judged a couple of online events so far. Big thing, I know it's kind of like hard, but like as much as you can kind of try to talk to the camera. There are different times when like people would be kind of like looking down like this or kind of like looking to the side. As a judge, it kind of seems like if you're doing that, you're looking at notes, which is you shouldn't be on notes. If you're in person, you wouldn't be on notes. So try to, as much as you can, talk to the camera, because also like you're talking to us, the judges who are scoring you. So it's going to help you more if you just kind of like work on trying to have some sort of eye contact with us, even though it is hard over camera. And then another thing, I thought there was definitely quite a few missed objections throughout the trial. There's some good objection battles, but I think in general, I think both sides could benefit a little bit more from being more familiar with the rules of evidence, being more comfortable making objections. Other than that, like I sent off comments for each of y'all, so I don't know how they're getting them back to you, but y'all will have those. But yeah, those are kind of my big picture comments for y'all.
I guess I'll give some comments. First, well, yeah, since ballots are gone, I think we can know what schools are you guys?
Wake Forest University.
Yeah.
Liberty University.
Oh, very cool. My name is Austin Worrell. I went to Miami University, so the Wake kids probably know Danny Kunkel. She was my teammate on the 2018 championship team. I love mock trial. I did it for 4 years, and I helped coach Miami for a year after. I haven't done it for a year, and I love this case. I think it's really cool how you get to pick which claim. Well done overall, adapting to the Zoom stuff and everything. I mean, I'm very impressed. Both rounds today, you've all done incredible jobs adapting. Even my internet started to become unstable at parts. And so, you know, things happen, and I appreciate it. I believe one of you even said, "Hey, Your Honor, I'm going to have some difficulties, so please be aware," which is super real because real attorneys are having to deal with this in real life too. So you're learning good skills if you want to go to law school. I'm currently a 1L at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Law school is fun and also crazy. So go for it if you want to do it. If not, you don't have to. I would say some general comments. I think that in the first round, most of the time, the opposing counsel's attorney during direct examinations had their camera on, so they were ready for objections. I think I prefer that format, but speak to your coaches about when they want your cameras on. There's no rule book for this, I feel like, so do what they want. But I would just say from an unbiased perspective as a judge, I appreciated being able to see all people who are involved. I think that kind of helps me feel like I'm more in a real courtroom dealing with this. So I would just think about that. I would echo Andrew's comments about objections, real easy ones that you could have made. Lack of foundation. Oh my goodness, so much foundation was lacking today. Speculation. People were thinking all sorts of things about other people that I was like, you probably don't know that. So, or at least the court wouldn't say that you know that. So let's keep those up. And then hearsay as well. I would say definitely let's go back to the rules and really revisit when are things allowed. You know, when is a statement an out of court statement being offered for the truth of the matter? You know, when is an opposing party statement allowed or not allowed? I think we had a good discussion about, you know, was Miss Martini's statement an opposing party statement? Well, in this case, and I don't know much about the case, but it seems like if she's an owner of the company and that is who you're suing, then sure, it was. And so I appreciated the knowledge that you guys have and the learning that you're going through. But at the same time, I would say, don't be afraid to really get comfortable with those rules, to really think through a lot of scenarios so that you can, in a split second, be able to say, well, Your Honor, it's this or it's that. Also, make sure you know little things like your stipulations. You know, the fact that certain pieces of evidence have already been pre-admitted, so therefore you can't object to them, you know, things like that, that will just save you from maybe looking like you don't know your stuff, or will give you the opportunity to look really smart when the other side sort of messes that up. In general, I think that's really all I had in general, besides just it's beginning of the year, but fake it till you make it is typically my advice, but please listen to your coaches. If they say don't do that, don't do that. But I think that often as a judge, I don't know the materials as well as you do. And so if you just act like you know everything to a T, I'm going to believe you, unless it's something that I really know is wrong. But I'm going to believe you if you act like you know what you're doing. And I think that the passion and the confidence is a little more difficult to come across via video. So just think about that, how sometimes if you're saying certain things quieter or a little more subdued, please do that. I don't want you yelling at me via Zoom all day long, but at the same time, just think that maybe you might have to speak a little louder via camera. All sorts of problems I never had to deal with as a competitor. So really good luck to you guys. And you are doing a fantastic job so far. I have lots of comments that I'll send through the Google Doc when I can combine all these together. But if you all have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If you want more specific comments, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't want to keep you around too long. So
Thank you
That
so
was-
much.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then there's us.